Okay, welcome back to the study hall, June 18th. We're going to do some RC today for the first time in, I think it's been a couple of years since we've done RC on here. So, welcome back, RC. We're going to look at some passages that are highly technical in nature. They just have lots of scientific-looking stuff in them. Or politics talk or legal language, just passages that are full of stuff. And then we're going to talk about why they would give you passages that are full of stuff. But, all right, here's the copyright notice. These problems in this session are all copyright GMAC. They're all from the free GMAT prep software. There is no as indicated otherwise today. They are actually all from there. So, that's where they're from. Okay. And don't forget where your multiple choice questions are found. They're under your name. Okay, but first, before we go to any multiple choice questions, I'm just going to throw a passage on the board. And then we're going to talk about what the deal is. Okay, that's a passage. You guys know that. Here's what a passage looks like. The question is, what is this all about? So there's basically two questions that I'm asking you here for responses in the chat window. First is, what should you do when a passage like this one is put in front of your face? And why do they do this sort of thing? Like, why is it on the test in the first place? Does anybody have any thoughts about those things? We're open to some brainstorming here, chat box. Chat box brainstorm. Okay, when you say filter through, what do you mean by that exactly? That's a promising answer. Tell me more about that. Okay, the gist. So, and then filter is, I kind of like that wording. Let me go ahead and put that on the board. Some other people are typing. We have a very quiet crowd today, apparently. Very introspective group. But I like this. I'm actually going to let me kill the words here. I wonder if people are being quiet because they're busy reading the passage. If that is the case, then don't do that right now. So here, no reading the passage right now. Okay. So I kind of like this. Filter. What do you mean understands the technicality? Depends on what you mean by that. That might be on point, but it might almost be the direct opposite of what you're supposed to do. So I'm curious, what do you mean by this? What does that mean? Maybe a little bit of explanation there. Okay, I got a few other people typing here. Okay, so that's better than I was afraid of. Because, all right, in English, when we say technicalities, this word means almost exactly the stuff that's not what you're saying and almost not the stuff that you are saying. Like, in English, technicalities means, like, the really specific stuff, not the overall gist. It's basically the opposite of overall gist. So, I mean, just make sure that you know that technicalities, plural, I mean, a technicality is one thing, but technicalities refers to the very detailed stuff. In other words, not transitions and not main idea, etc. Like you might have heard, if you read articles about legal cases, you might hear about people being acquitted of crimes based on some technicality. That means that there's like this little thing in the law that was some tiny, tiny aspect of legal procedure that wasn't followed, right, or something, and so they got off. You know, and that's what technicality is. So if that's not what you mean, then good. But because if you actually meant this, then that is precisely why they do not do this. But if you mean what you explained later, then good. Okay, well, it's about blah, blah, blah. Okay, yeah, right. So you guys are starting to basically get the deal here. So let me put a couple other answers up here. Let me take that one away just because I think you have the right idea, but again, the word's there. And then here's a couple others that people have read. I like this one. The idea was about what was the other's main point. Sure. Okay. Yeah. So you know what this test is for. All right. This test is for future managers, ostensibly, because it is the GMAT. It's for people who are going to be studying for MBAs and stuff like that. And I mean, if you asked me to give you a definition of what a manager is, I could do pretty well by using as a definition. I could just say manager is someone who doesn't have to care about details. I mean, that's pretty much what managers are about, right? Because, like, they delegate. I mean, their responsibility, on the other hand, is the big picture. And managers generally tend to delegate details to other departments of some sort. I mean, there are occasionally small exceptions to this, but that's what managers are there for. They're there to kind of be the big idea people and to delegate the small ideas to others. And so this is reflective of what they're doing with these passages. And that's kind of what you guys have said there in the chat column. So if you know, the second question is really probably the question I should have asked first, because it really gets to the heart of why you would want to do what you want to do. But why do they do this sort of thing? This is, at the end of the day, it's because ultimately these people here are going to be doing, hopefully, are going to be in some sort of managerial position. So they want to make sure that you can get an idea of what it is about without the technical stuff. And I kind of like this comment as well. Because it's not even just a matter of skipping over stuff, although that's important too. This also hits on a very important point here, which is that they don't expect you to even understand everything. In fact, like, part of the reason they really go over the top with these passages full of big words and stuff is that you're actually not supposed to understand all the words. Like, it's not even just you don't have to, it's you are actually not supposed to. And these passages are given to you with an expectation that you will not be able to process all of those details in the time that you have. That's actually a fact, right? You're not really supposed to understand all of the details, especially in the given time frame. I mean, if you could really pore over them for a long time, I mean, you guys are smart people and you could probably figure it out, everything they're saying, but they want you specifically to not really have time to understand everything. That's the point. Because that also is a very, very, very managerial type of thing. I mean, if you, let's say, were some product manager at a very highly technical enterprise, I mean, you're going to get all kinds of engineering specs on your desk that have hundreds of pages of technical diagrams in them. Are you going to understand what's going on in those? Probably not really at all. But it doesn't really matter, because what your thought process there would be is like, what does this mean for our business? What does this mean for the client? What does this mean for the supplier? What does it mean for, just what does it mean? And you would expect some sort of abstract in there. I mean, if the stuff were presented with you as just diagrams and there were no like statements of abstract or main idea or purpose, you would be a little bit mad with these people. So yeah. You don't have to care about details. That's a thing. That's why they do this. They want to make sure that you can get through without really understanding stuff. So, really, no kidding. You're not supposed to understand it at all. Okay. Now, and filter is that's what filter. Hopefully, it's what you meant by filter, is that you get not bogged down by it. So there's a place in books where you find stuff without all the detailed stuff. I like to use the word stuff today, apparently. If you were looking at a nonfiction book, where would you look to find this stuff? Like, where would this be in a nonfiction book? Where do you find this stuff? Yeah, table of contents is what I'm looking for here. I mean, that's probably what you meant when you said index. But in fact, the index is pretty much precisely the opposite. I mean, the index is usually a list of technical terms and then like pages that they're on. I mean, the index usually has almost no main ideas anywhere, right? It's like, here, this term is on page 52. This term is on page 134. But yeah, the table of contents is definitely the deal, right? So, and I mean, especially in nonfiction books, when you have tables of contents, some of them have chapter headings and then subheadings. If you know what I mean, like there's the big chapter heading in boldface, and then there are some subsection headings underneath that, but still they don't go into all the details. But they are a little bit more detailed than just chapter. So what a good mentality to adopt here to do the right kind of job that you're supposed to do. The mentality that you want to have is, imagine that you make tables of contents for a living. Like actually for a living, you produce. I think the internet is being stupid, so I'm going to be quiet for a second. Okay. There was some sort of sound delay there. There's these icons that it shows when the internet just can't keep up with me because I'm so fast. Just kidding. I'm not fast at all, actually. I'm very slow. Okay. Imagine that you make tables of contents for a living. I mean, this is actually a very good analogy, because if you were paid per table of contents that you made, you would not waste any time reading anything that you did not have to read, because you would want to make more money by making other tables of contents. So this is very far-fetched, and whenever I come up with these little thought experiments, they tend to be sort of far-fetched. But that's good in a sense that it'll keep it in your head. It's a very vivid image. Like, imagine that you get $100 for a table of contents or something. Then, well, you're going to want to not read a bunch of stuff that you don't have to read. So that's the point. We're going to talk about exactly how much of this text you really have to read here in a bit. It's not as much as you might think. But, yeah, good. All right, here's the passage. So how about this? Remember, you make tables of contents for a living. That's what you do. That's what you do with your life. Okay, so make one for this passage. And let's see if you can do it See what you can do in 1 minute. Not kidding. Actually, 1 minute. Go for it. Okay, that's 1 minute. That wasn't very long, right? Did anybody actually manage to get through the whole thing? In table of contents form. I mean, obviously not through all the words. If you did, does anybody want to venture in the chat box to put what they wrote? Got a few people writing. Only a few. Well, just to make sure that this really is what you have already gotten from this. There. Okay. Pretty good so far. Okay. All right. So this is pretty good, right? That last one seems like it is a little bit on the detail side. Like, is that the kind of thing that you're going to find in a table of contents, that last thing? The same belief that paid labor is helpful for women? Probably not. Tell you what. I try to refrain from talking about my own approach to these things too much, but let me show you all the words that I would actually read, me personally, if you put this thing in front of my face. Okay, like, let's do that. Something, emphasize something, and I don't even care what that is. Someone else, by contrast, emphasize something else, and I don't really care. Yep, that's all the words in the first paragraph that I would ever see with my eyes. And then we have this. However, despite antagonism between them, those have to be the same two groups that we were just talking about before. The two movements shared certain beliefs, both regarded something. I don't care beyond that point. Colon, I definitely don't care what's after a colon, because that just means it's going to be explanation of stuff. So, no, don't do that. Both groups also recognize blah, 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 blah. In fact, blah, 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 I don't care, because I know it's just going to be more of the same. When they put in fact, it's the same theme, just more of it. Although the intense hostility made it difficult. Okay. Finally, although something made it difficult, we didn't care. They concurred in blah, 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 blah. There's a lot of blue stuff. Like, almost the whole thing is blue stuff. All right, this is really all that Rob's eyes are going to look at because I think I've mentioned this in previous sessions of this thing, but I don't read very fast at all. I have various issues there. I'm a slow reader in the first place, not to mention dyslexic on top of it. So I can't really afford to read a lot of words. So I don't read a lot of words. But luckily, to make a table of contents, I don't have to read a lot of words, so it's good. Someone has a multiple choice answer selected. That's interesting. Let me clear that out. Okay. So yeah, right. What do we have left? Well, we have 2 schools of thought. So all right, sure. I mean, you could, if you wanted to, you could put some stuff about how it was 2 schools of thought within whatever it was, Russian feminism or what have you. But 2 schools of thought that were different. That's the whole first paragraph. It's just what are these 2 groups of people who think stuff, different stuff. But there, the second thought is basically, but they shared a bunch of beliefs. All right, there you go. Table of contents. I mean, in an actual table of contents, of course, it wouldn't be as casual as that. It wouldn't say a bunch of and stuff. It would be like shared beliefs, ... But you get the point. So this is the basic idea. If you filter out all of the details, this is what you get. This is what's left in the pan, so to speak, if you boil off all of the details. Okay, now what is the point of doing that in a more practical sense? I mean, on the last slide we talked about what is the point of that in a very philosophical way, like this. I mean, this is nice that we think about this. Managers, details, they don't have to care about them. What do I call this stuff that I'm looking at? What do I call what? What do I call it? Do you want to give it a name? We can give it a name. We can call it Joe. I don't have a name for it. I mean, does it need a name? I mean, as long as you know what it is, right? I mean, you could call it table of contents meat. You could call it Joe. You could call it Pink Flamingo. I like to call things Pink Flamingo. You probably know that. I mean, this whole giving things names, it's not really terribly necessary for the most part. I mean, and I would avoid doing that, because if you start naming too many things, that tends to divert the focus of your life to naming more things instead of understanding things. I mean, in fact, if you'll allow me to digress for about 20 seconds here. If you name things too much, it will actually stop the learning process. Like, it really will. That sounds like a very dramatic statement, but it's true. For example, like, one thing that I do from time to time is help people construct diets, and like, there's this category of things called carbohydrates. You probably know that. And I mean, the problem with this category is that it encompasses so many things, right? Like, sugars are carbohydrates, and so are pasta, and so is fiber. But so the problem is, because there's this name called carbohydrate, people stop trying to learn about the differences as soon as they have that name. They just slap that name on food, and then it's all the same in their heads. Not good. I mean, actually, when you name stuff, it just prevents further understanding. Like, I would, in fact, advise against naming stuff unless you absolutely have to name it, which is that's a rare situation. So, yeah. I mean, basically what I'm doing here is I'm kind of being lazy, which is a thing that I'm very good at doing. I'm very good at being lazy. And these are words that when I see them, I understand what they mean right away. Okay, now this is a very personal thing, and this is probably not going to work for everybody, but my criterion here, I'm not looking for anything too specific like transition words or anything like that, because that's too much effort really for my brain, man. Like what I do is I just do this. Like, if I understand words as soon as I see them, I'll read them. And if I don't, I'll skip them. Because I mean, as I mentioned before, I'm not a very fast reader, and I don't really like instantly see what technical stuff means. Like I would have to look at it for a long time. So like anything that I cannot immediately look at, I just don't look at. I mean, I just like if the meaning of the words does not immediately register, then I just move on. It's kind of like here's a really stupid analogy, but let's say I'm like pulling plants out of the ground. It's just kind of like only pulling the plants that come out of the ground as soon as I grab them. Like if there's any effort at all, if the plant sticks in the ground, I'll just leave it. It's kind of like that. That's a stupid analogy, but I think it's a decent one. Okay, so I mean, if some of you guys, what I mean is that if some of you guys are better than I am at faster understanding of technical stuff, which I'm sure a lot of you are, then you might need a different way to do this. Because like I like a lot of people who come to these study halls are tech people, engineers and such like, and I mean those people are probably very good at understanding details when they first see them. I'm not, so I can just be like, whatever, man. If I don't understand it, then blah 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 blah. But take what works for you, leave what doesn't. Basically, that's the deal. That's what I do with my life here. But okay. Yeah, basically. But here, I mean, tell you what. Let's say that you. Yeah, okay. I don't really know what happened there. What was the last thing that you heard me say? Anybody? What was the last take? Okay, so that was most of it. Again, this might be an apt description of what I'm doing, but what I would warn people against here is not trying to consciously think about this. Because if I were looking at this passage and I was actively thinking, like, I need to find subject one, subject two, and transition words, like, I would totally not be able to do it. I mean, it's really just what are the non-technical terms that I can grab hold of here, like what, and those, fortunately, those have to do with, I mean, those are pretty much the things that are going to outline all of this stuff, because those are also, the other thing that this has the other advantage that this has is that these kinds of things that are left over tend to be used in very much the same way that they're used in conversation. You know, like the things that we call transitions and stuff here. Those are very conversation-like. So that's another good thing. Is everybody able to hear me right now? Give me a smiley face if you can hear me. Okay, well, a lot of people can. So, all right, I guess there might be lingering issues with some people, but that's good to know. All right, but this is what I do again. I mean, the comment that I'll make here is, I mean, this is what I do, but you should find some sort of way to personalize this process. That's my way to do it. It's not necessarily the same as your way, but that's the thing. Okay. All right. Well, we'll get there. That's gonna be a sec. We'll get there in a moment. Now, this whole reading thing. What's the point, more practically speaking? What I mean by that is we've already talked about what was the point in a very abstract kind of philosophical understanding sort of way. where the point is to test whether you can read, like a manager should be able to read. Okay, fine, but what is the point of this in terms of answering the questions? What's the point of this reading that we do? Yeah, all right. You know where to look for stuff. Okay. Any other thoughts? And to help you answer general questions, do you mean help you, or do you, that's kind of, help you is kind of a weak statement. Is that really what you mean? Okay, that's better. I mean, I know I'm picking apart words here, but there's a big difference there, because help you means you still need other resources to do it, like answer choices. Whereas it'll allow you to do it means that it won't. The other thing is, okay, let me tell you what I don't remember this, but my dad says that when I was like 7 or 8 years old, if somebody would say that like fruit is good for you, like that just wouldn't be good enough for me. I'd be like, what does good for you mean? Like, good for whom? When? Under what circumstances? You know, is it good for a lumberjack? Is it good for a ballerina? Who's it good for? Yeah, I was probably a very annoying child. I'm sure I was. But at the same time, you see where I'm going with this, which is that there are a lot of statements that are so vague as to not really mean anything. I'm going to kind of pick on this statement right here. Because like a lot of people say stuff like this, and I think it's because this is the kind of stuff that you see in textbooks. But this doesn't really mean anything. I mean, this is not practical. Practical is like it lets you answer this kind of question in this kind of way, or it lets you do this in preparation for this kind of question. This is never practical, guys, like in terms of goals and helping you meet them. I mean, make sure that everything that you understand about how to take this test is in practical terms. Because that sounds very simple, but a lot of people just don't do it. So in other words, what we have in practical terms here is, if you have a main idea question, you should have enough to answer them already. That's why I was picking at words like help you answer, because it isn't just help you answer. It should be, you should be able to straight up answer that question right now, kind of thing. And then you know where to look for stuff. The stuff that you would have to look for would be the detailed stuff. So for detailed questions, remember we think of this as being kind of a table of contents. And this is where you discover the beauty of that analogy, because it can really act as a table of contents. It's exactly the same sort of thing. It'll let you find that. So, and I mean, you're not going to find everything immediately. I mean, you do have time to look for stuff. I mean, again, this is where I'm going to sort of pull the personal card here. I mean, I know that I am a much slower reader than most of you guys are. Like, I know that. That's a fact. Because I'm a slower reader than, like, everybody. But I can still find stuff. So, I mean, I might have to look through some things, and it may not be in the first place that I always look for it. But it's okay to take a little bit of time to find stuff. So this is practical terms, right? I mean, I would challenge this last statement in terms of practical terms, because I don't really know what this means in practical terms. At least in terms of answering the questions on this exam. So, and I mean, again, I'm not trying to pick on someone who says this. I mean, this is really something you guys should think about too. I mean, because no structure, well, that's great, but why would you care? And make sure that you have an answer to that. So, okay. Let's talk about that, by the way. Let me go ahead and answer this. I'm going to here. Next page. Here's that summary that we just had. These are the benefits of that sort of accelerated reading type thing. Now there's this question. Okay. So I hear you here, but what the question that is prompted in my head is, what are you proposing as an alternative? And I mean, this is directed at the person who originally wrote that, but it's also anyone else who is thinking along the same lines is welcome to respond. The original question came from Shanti. Because this kind of sounds like, okay, this is not perfect. And of course, you're right, it's not perfect. I mean, because we have two goals of different scope here. We have main idea and we have details. You're not really going to hit both of those at the same time. But I'm wondering if you actually had something else in mind. So let's see. I think you were typing stuff, but there it is. Okay, so yeah, I mean, this is the other thing that, remember you have to do something. I mean, I know that sounds like it's very obvious, but people have this way of not liking options, but not having other options. It's interesting. I mean, the critical thinking side of this is a good thing. Like, it's always good to be critical and skeptical of stuff and looking for improvement. That's always good. But at the same time, you know, just make sure that you make sure that you don't do too much of that unless you actually have some sort of alternative in your head. So, I mean, I see this especially on the quant section where people are like, just so in general, just there's a little bit of a digression, but beware of this mentality, kind of in life too. But for example, on the quant section, someone will be contemplating something that's a fair amount of work, let's say long division, and they'll say something like this. I don't want to do that because usually it's because I think it'll take too long, but it's something. It's some sort of reason not to do it. I mean, the biggest thing here is do not ever think this. Do not ever think this at all unless you have another way, unless you have another approach already in mind. Like, just don't do it. I mean, it's weird because I see this so often, and it's very weird to me. There's people who have exactly one method in mind, and they talk themselves out of it anyway. It's kind of weird. I mean, if you got one method, you should just do it. And that's kind of how, I mean, in life, the same thing is true. If you don't have an alternative way of doing something, then do it. I mean, that's actually all that time management really is here, too. But if you have an alternative, then go for it. But otherwise, okay. And then the other thing is this. Okay. Now let's talk about this other thing. This is intriguing. Somebody wrote this. I'm curious as to what this specifically means. Like, can you give me instructions for how to do that? Yeah, okay, so move through I think is answering the point we made before, so that's legit. Because with this kind of thing, there tends to not really be much of a middle ground for a lot of people. But I mean, what does that mean though? Like where do you stop? I mean, because what this is, I mean, I know I'm probably annoying you on purpose right now, but what I mean here is that it's very hard to find this middle ground. I mean, like, 'cause what you're proposing here, without explicitly saying it, is you're proposing some sort of intermediate between this overall table of contents that we have here and everything. So the question is how to define that, and I'm not really, or how to do it. I'm not really sure. I mean, you don't have to come up with that on the spot, because I don't want this discussion to hijack the entire thing. But because if you don't really have a very, very firm plan for how to do that, it's probably going to devolve into reading everything, and that's not such a great idea. I mean, the other thing is also, remember that you're only going to get 3 or 4 questions per passage. I mean, that's the other big reason to do this, is probabilities, just pure odds. I mean, think about it. I mean, the best argument against, well, there are 2 very good arguments against doing anything more detailed than this, even a little bit. So hear me out here. The first is more details equals less understanding. I mean, yes, it really does. This is a fact. This is an uncontested fact. Like, if my friend tells me, dude, there's traffic, so I'm going to be late, then I get her point, because, dude, I can't not get her point. That's all she said. Whereas if she is like, okay, this truck full of tomatoes just turned over on the road in front of me, and there's tomatoes everywhere on the road, and other cars are slipping on them, and another car ran into this other car, and so now they're clearing out the lanes, and there's this tow truck, and blah, blah, blah. The more of that there is, the less likely I am to understand that her point is I'm late because of traffic. The more details, I mean, it might be an entertaining little story, but the more of that there is, the less likely, and definitely the less obvious the main point is. So, where did you do some RC questions yesterday? Out of a book? There you go. I mean, the questions in the software will pick and choose from those and give you 3 or 4. So, that's how that works. Okay. Now, you probably noticed that of your 5 to 6 questions, there were probably a couple that were way similar. Like, they were like almost the same question, but not quite. So that means if you had that on the exam, you're not going to get more than 1 of those. So yeah, the actual exam should not give you, I mean, again, you shouldn't be counting questions anyway. I mean, honestly, if you have the kind of focus that you need on this test, you shouldn't even remember how many questions there were anyway. Like, I mean, because if you were like, let's say they throw 5 questions at you, I mean, the bad result would be, oh, I got freaked out because they threw 5 questions at me. I mean, ideally, it would be, I didn't even know there were 5 questions because I was concentrating on the questions so much. So, I mean, they shouldn't give you more than 4, but honestly, if they do, you should not notice. It's pretty much the deal. But back to this, more details equals less understanding because yes, it does. But also, just think about probabilities, just pure odds, meaning that you're probably going to you'll get probably 1 main idea question, so you'll get 2 to 3 detail questions for a typical passage. So, therefore, if you're doing this at any level that accounts for details, you're probably wasting a lot of time, because the odds of seeing any particular detail are very low. Very, 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 very low. So, I mean, again, if you have a lot of time to burn and you read very, very, very fast, then this might be a different game. But even if that is true, there's still point one here, which is still going to be a thing. I mean, if you read too much of the details, it'll impact negatively on your ability to understand the point. In the same way, in exactly the same way as there's traffic, so I'm late is easier to understand than the whole story about a truck full of tomatoes. It just is. It's how our brains work. So, okay. How about that? All right. So now let's talk about question types. So let's do this. In practical terms, let's talk about main idea questions. Here's the passage again. Let's say you get a main idea question. Let's talk, well, I'm going to put one on the board here in a sec. Here. What do you think? So using your polling tools, give me an A if you think the answer choices will help you answer the question. I just cannot type today. Give me a B if you think that basically, well, that the answer choices will neither help nor hurt you, not impact my ability to answer the question at all. And give me a C if you think the answer choices will have an adverse effect on that ability. Harder to answer the question. Okay, what do you think? Remember where the multiple choice questions are at, guys. Questions are, multiple choice options are here. They're underneath your name. Okay. Here's what you guys are saying. Interestingly, these were all about equally popular until the last few people all put B. But so let's say you're about to meet somebody, and you haven't met the person yet, and your friend is like, "Dude, this person you're about to meet is super weird, sketchy, weird, strange person." I mean, what's probably going to happen? Assuming that you respect your friend's opinion at all, even a little bit, what will probably happen when you meet the person? Yeah, it's going to have an effect, right? You're going to see weird, even if there is not any weird to see. You'll still magically see it. It's called the power of suggestion. I mean, in most parts of life, it is a good thing. It's the reason why we do not have to explain things to each other all the time in excruciating detail. That's because of this. But in terms of that kind of independently forming opinions and stuff like that, not a good thing. Right? But it'll happen, right? Like, oh, this person's talking a lot. That's weird. Oh, this person's not talking. That's weird. Like, weird. It's going to be weird no matter what. Or I'm sure that you guys all know somebody who just goes around thinking everyone hates them. You know, even if it's honest, constructive feedback. Oh, dude, hate. And they just see hate everywhere, even if it isn't there. That's a thing. It's not a thing with details. Okay, like right now I'm wearing a shirt that is black. If I was not in the room yet and somebody was like, "Ron's wearing purple shirt," and then I walked in, you would be no more likely to think my shirt is purple. You'd be like, "Dude, it's black." But in terms of abstract ideas, it's super easy to be influenced by that. So no, the answer you should be giving me is this. In fact, this is the choices are pretty much the only thing that makes main idea questions hard, because they can sing songs to you and you will listen to the songs. Really, they are. The choices are like the thing that makes main idea questions hard. They're kind of the only thing that does. Because remember that you've gone through the passage. You should be equipped, right? Remember that you're reading, where reading is in quotation marks because it's not really reading. It should, at least in an ideal world, it has already equipped you with exactly the understanding necessary to answer main idea questions. Yes, it has. So what you should do, it's kind of like meeting someone before your friend talks about them instead of after. Like if you can form your own opinion, you're going to form what is a more accurate opinion for you at least. And then you can go talk to your friend and you can meet that discussion on even terms. So what you should do is, you should know, as soon as you notice that it's a main idea question, you should physically cover the answers with your hand. Yes, you should. And you might look kind of silly doing that, but you will be a silly-looking person with a higher score, which is probably a good trade-off. And then predict the answer by yourself. Yes, you should. You should do it. And then uncover the choices, and then check. Okay, now when you check, you still need to be stubborn, because when you check the answers will still be singing songs to you. I mean, they will still be doing the same thing, so be stubborn. In the same way, like if you meet the person and think that they're not weird at all, and then your friend is like, oh, so weird. I mean, you have to be sort of stubborn about your opinion here. So, but the deal is this. That's what you should do. So, okay. Here is a main idea question for this. Remember where to find the multiple choice options. And you should put your hand in front of these things. And you should answer them. Okay. Go for it. Shouldn't take too long, because remember, you should already be equipped with what you need to do this. Also, I'm going to make a comment that may sound sort of cryptic, but here, this is a word, and it means something. If you don't know where I'm going with that, then you will soon find out. Go ahead and give this a shot. Yeah, that should still on. I was waiting for you to answer the question. Okay. So pretty good here. Actually, very good. If you don't have an answer to this, you should pick one. It shouldn't take forever long, but I'm going to give you like 5 more seconds to pick one if you don't have one yet. Okay, so pretty overwhelming response. It should be A for sure, and most of you are picking A. Nobody picked B. Nobody picked D. I mean, remember what? So here is the outline that I had, at least. Where was that? That was here. Okay, so you had 2 schools of thought that were different, but they shared a bunch of thoughts. Like if you're going to make a prediction, the prediction should be something like this. It should be something like that. Like here are 2 schools of thought, and here are some things we have in common. Or yeah, things are different, but they have much stuff in common. Now, let's go back to the red thing. That's a word. It's a word that means something. What does it mean? Okay, that's what it means. Now, what does that mean in practical terms? Like, main means that you have to. It's more about what you have to not do than what you have to do. I mean, in this case, the primary point is to point out that they are similar to each other, but like this is something that you should think of more consciously than you might. The word primary specifically means that you have to exclude stuff. If you don't exclude it, it's not primary. I mean, again, author's focus is sort of vague. I mean, think about fruit is good for you again. I mean, like practical terms, guys. Like in practical terms, primary means, or its main idea, means that you have to exclude less important stuff, including stuff that's just used to set up the main point, including stuff that is just background. Okay, so I mean, and this is there's some human understanding that goes into this, but there's two ways to figure out what is primary. I mean, one of which is basically common sense. So, number one, common sense. Actually, three ways. Number two, relative volume. What I mean by relative volume is like how much crap is there of each type. And number three, what comes at the end. Conclusion, especially on shorter passages. Okay, what I mean by common sense is like imagine someone gave you the same kind of structure, but they were just talking about things in everyday life. Like for example, let's say that I did this. I was like, okay, so yeah, all right, let's say obviously Miami and Toronto are different. Blah 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 blah. Okay. But then I'm like, but there are actually lots of things that are the same about them. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, I mean, what is my point? Is my point that Miami is not like Toronto, or is my point that Miami is like Toronto? Which is my point? My point is clearly that Miami is like Toronto. I mean, that's definitely the point. I mean, the only reason I'm even mentioning this is to set up the things that are, is to set you up for saying that they're actually like each other. The only reason this is important at all here is that, oh, hey, you might not expect this to be, but yeah. So this is the same thing as that. I mean, if you heard this conversation, I'm going to bet money that nobody here would come away from this conversation thinking that my point was that they're different. You wouldn't get that. You'd be like, okay, well, yeah, there are some base differences, but whoa, they're like each other in a lot of ways. That's clearly the point. So that's number one. By the way, common sense always wins. Like if you read this stuff and get a very strong intuitive bent in one direction, then you should go that way. Period. End of story. Like there's no amount of word counting or methods or rule strategies, whatever, that will ever overcome plain old common sense. So that's why this is number one and not number more than one. I mean, if common sense goes a direction, go that direction. Period. End of story. You don't even think about anything else. Relative volume, I mean, guys, there's like twice as much stuff here. I mean, no decent author is going to spend twice as much time discussing what is not actually the point. It's not how it works. I mean, that's not how life works. I mean, especially in a paragraph this short, I mean, where they spend most of their time is going to be primary. Because if it wasn't, it would just be bad writing. So that's what I mean by relative volume here. I mean, we have like 30%, 70%. And on top of that, I mean, remember that a lot of these things have like a story arc. Like they have a progression. Like this, if you didn't have this first paragraph here, then it wouldn't seem very significant that these things are true. And the same thing here, if I just say, okay, lots of things are the same about Miami and Toronto. I mean, that's not as effective as it is if I first point out, well, one of them is tropical, and the other one is cold, and, you know, they're very different on the outside. If I do that, then it makes it much more effective to point out, okay, like it becomes much more forceful to point out the similarity. So like here, you like, let me say conclusion versus build up. Like this is just a build up to that. Like I mean, because you guys don't know anything about these two groups of people. So if all you had was this one paragraph, it would seem like boring. Why are you telling us this? But the fact that they are generally seen as different groups makes this, it's clear that what they're trying to do is this, and that's what makes it matter. It's like, okay, the reason why all this is a thing is because of that background. So, but all three of these point to the fact, the primary stuff being similarities. So definitely, this is primary. That's the primary thing, because it is. All three of those things should tell you that it is. This is only there because it's a necessary piece of background for that. So there it is, primary. But just don't forget that when you are asked for a primary anything, that you do have to exclude things. Like if you try not to, then you're going to be in trouble. At the same time, if you try to exclude 70% of the passage, that's not a good idea either. So there it is. Okay, how about that? Now, let's talk about detail stuff. Because remember, the whole deal here is these are the things where you don't read the details. So the value of this, of having table of contents type thing, is that it can literally act as a table of contents. And so see, here's the thing. If you're thinking about looking for more details first, you got to understand that there's going to be a trade-off. If you're looking for more details, your ability to see the big picture will be compromised. So what I'm saying is that even if you're going to have one question on the screen when the passage appears, and this is sometimes, I mean, I mean to apply this all through this whole thing, but just to make it explicit, like even if the first question is a detail question, you should still do this type of reading first. Yes, you should. Because if you don't, if you see a detail question first and you just go on some search for that detail, then the problem is you might find it, but then you're going to be back to 0 for the next question. If you don't develop that bigger understanding, then it's all the way back to the starting point for every following question. I mean, again, you should try it. The best answer to all of this stuff about how to do things is just try all of it and see what happens. Just try every method you can think of. Even if it sounds kind of stupid, just try it and see if it works. And then keep the methods that work for you and throw out the ones that don't. But, I mean, if you start looking for details right off the top without having a table of contents type understanding, I can bet you that that's going to be very inefficient in the long run. Because you're going to have to it's going to be like getting a new passage for every single question. Which would be, let's just say, not fun. So, okay. You know where to look for stuff, is the point. So, sure. For the detail questions, that's the advantage there. You know where to look for stuff. Okay, so we're going to get one of those on the board. How about, where was it? Let's do this one first. A little more interesting. No, this is the more interesting one. This one tends to be more interesting. So now you should know where to look for this, at least roughly. Notice there's the word "and" here. It's a big hint, and that would not be a big hint if you had not already made this table of contents type thing. So go for it. Okay, let me give you a sort of obscure hint here, because a lot of you guys are picking a choice that you should not pick. Here's a thought. Let's say, thought experiment. You have eyes, but they work, you're not blind, but you don't know English. Which answer would you pick? Don't pick it here. Don't do it. There should be a lot of you changing your answer. Go for it. All right, at least 5 of you get what I'm doing here. The second question. Are there 2 questions? I only see 1 question. That's a thought experiment, man. It's an experiment of thought. You imagine that your eyes work, but that you don't know English. But that you can recognize letters and patterns and stuff in the same way that, like I don't know Chinese characters, right? But if I have eyes that work, so I can see the same Chinese character and realize that it's the same one. That's kind of where I'm going with this. But at least 6 of you have already totally gotten the message of this. So here, I tell you what. If you know where I'm going with that, where am I going with that? Which is the answer that you should not pick. Don't do it. Do not pick C. Don't pick C. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Because here's, okay, the deal with choice C is if I just don't know English at all, like I said, I don't know Chinese characters. I don't know them. If you wrote this passage in Chinese characters, then without knowing any of the Chinese characters, I would be like, hey, look, I see these Chinese characters, and I see the same or almost the same Chinese characters, and then I see this exact set of Chinese characters, and I see the same Chinese characters here. Don't do it. This will never be the correct answer. They will not do that. I mean, they only call this part of the test. You know what they call it, right? They call it reading comprehension. That name is not a joke. Like, it's not reading, recognizing words. It's not. It's reading comprehension. They want you to at least know what the words say. And the answer was something like this. You would not even have to know what the words say. You would just be like, oh, Chinese characters, same Chinese characters. I guess that must be the answer. Nope, not how it works. I mean, it's important to realize this because it will never, ever work like that. I mean, if they can change the words, they will always change the words. Like, the only time that it's ever acceptable to have the same words is if you cannot possibly change them. Like, if there's no other way to say that at all, then, yeah. I mean, same words is only acceptable if it's not possible, or at least very inconvenient or awkward to change those words. For example, you can, like, if a choice says the U.S. Supreme Court and the question and the passage says the U.S. Supreme Court, that's fine because there's no other way to say the U.S. Supreme Court. You know, on the other hand, liberating people, there are a lot of other ways of saying liberating people without using the word liberate. You can say free people. You can say relieve them of. You can say, you know, advance them past this. You can say, I mean, you get the point. Or help them overcome it. And there are a million zillion ways to say liberate without saying liberate. I mean, notice this is not the reason why the choice is wrong. I mean, the choice is wrong because it's wrong, and we'll get there in a second. But that is what I'm saying. Because, you mean RC, this is RC, but yeah. Because they want you to actually, like, process the statement is the point. So, thought experiment, don't do it. Okay. Now, I mean, this is what I mean by, okay, because, like, if it's a science passage, then that's going to be sort of like the U.S. Supreme Court. I mean, they're not going to change the science words because it's not possible to do that. On the other hand, they could still very easily change the other words that surround those words. So, you know, because the entire passage is not going to be entirely jargon. I mean, they're going to have a lot of jargon, but the stuff they're doing with it is going to be not. So, okay. So the deal is sometimes you're going to have keywords that are really incredibly specific to the point that you will know exactly where to look. Okay, if that's great, then great. Like, if the keywords are incredibly specific, then you'll already have, like, a tiny section of text to check. So just read it. Okay, now, if they're a little bit less specific, then skim through choices to see what they contain. So, like, if we look at this, because the problem is that this entire paragraph is stuff that they agreed on. So, we kind of need to do that. Yeah, the last, like, 5 minutes was about why C is wrong. So, I mean, if you were here for that, hopefully. That is what I'm saying. That was the point of the thought experiment, too. Okay. Because, you know, they want you to read the words and understand what they mean. I mean, they don't want you to read all the words, but they want you to when your attention is called to them. Okay, so we have, like, just glance through the choices and see what they have here. There's some stuff about achieving equality. There's some stuff about achieving aims, I mean, there's a lot of stuff about achieving goals. And then there's roots, and there's, like, other countries. I mean, you might already know they're not talking about other countries. So this is enough to get rid of that. But if not, I'm going to look. So this doesn't look like any of those. This kind of stuff doesn't really look at that. Doesn't look like that either. This is specific stuff that they advocated. None of this is specific stuff that they advocated. And then, all right, so now this is more general stuff. So this is the one that looks the most like what's in the choices. So what you want to do is you want to explain this to a 9-year-old. How would you explain that to a 9-year-old? I mean, this word is a word that matters here, by the way, but if you don't know what that word means, then you can kind of figure it out from this. How would you explain that to a 9-year-old? Yeah, that's what it says. It says that the women's cause, these people, I mean both sets of people, agreed that the cause of women was less important than the overall situation of the Russian population. I mean, okay, so that's the word subordinated means that exactly. It means like this is less important than the other thing. But even if you don't know that word, I mean, if you look at what they say, they must. Let's say that this is a completely strange word. Let's just say let's just say that this word is a big block of blue color. Okay, then still they agreed to blank women's goals to the more important goal of this. Well, that's probably going to mean something like it's less important because the other goal is more important. So there's still enough context. I mean, if you know the word subordinate, it's definitely going to help you here. But if you don't, there's still enough context there to figure it out. So the word concur means believe together. So yes, it does. It absolutely does. That's what the word concur means. It means we both think the same thing. So it's not a best choice thing. There are going to be 4 answers that are completely wrong, and your review is not done until you realize why all 4 wrong answers are completely and totally wrong. Like, C is pretty much the opposite of what they are saying here. Like, C says that this is, like, so important that it will make that other thing happen. That's not what they're saying. What they're saying is they decided to set that aside for the moment while they worked on this. So that's what B says. I mean, notice that they're being more generic. They tend to do that a lot. What I mean by more generic, and we know, whoa, it's late, we gotta shut down this show here pretty soon, but they tend to be much more general sometimes. Okay, so be on the lookout for this. Larger political aims. I did not mean to make that opaque. This is a common thing that they do on these things, just so they can change the words and make sure that you understand or recognize the same concept in different words. Like that's that. It's just a more generic form of it. So, but if you have eyes that don't understand English, then you can't do that. That's the point. Thought experiment. And you have to actually know English to be able to do that. So one common way of transforming words. They don't do it every single time, but one common way of transforming words is to change them into a more general form. Like here we went from liberating the entire Russian population as opposed to women, and they took that as, I mean, that is a form of larger aim. So, yeah. What is the wordy paragraph? You mean like the original text is the wordy paragraph? I mean, if that's what you mean, then sure, because it's gonna. I mean, yeah, it'll be closer to the explain to a 9-year-old thing. So, but that's what you should do. I mean, the point of doing this, by the way, there's 2 points of explain to a 9-year-old. The first is, if you can't do it, then you should think a little bit more about what those words mean. But second, if you can, then you won't be stuck in the same words anymore. So yeah, you will have to go back and read, but the point is, again, you can use this as a table of contents. Like, because you did the original reading, you know that you can ignore all of paragraph 1 when you have and here. Because according to our original reading, we know that all the points of agreement are in the second paragraph. So, I mean, are you correct that we still have to read some text? Yes, you are. You know, I mean, you're still going to have to read words, but you don't have to read as many words. Like, if you didn't have that table of contents, you would have to pick fruitlessly through the first paragraph before you got to the second paragraph. So you're still saving time. I mean, you're not going to have a laser that will take you directly to the right part of the passage instantly because, you know, the test is challenging, but it'll be better. Yeah, no, that's totally the point. You shouldn't do any detailed reading at first because you're going to have to go back and do it anyway. Exactly. So you should not do it twice, but you can just do it once. Okay, I gotta shut this show down, guys. It's already 8.5 minutes over and serious schedule. So thank you for attending. I guess we can do a little bit more of this in one or two sessions from now or something. But let's see. All right, cool. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Next session should be, it might be 3 weeks because we have a holiday week, but it might not. I'm not positive. I think it might just be 2 weeks. So check the site. It'll be up there, and you'll see that. All right. Thank you, and we'll kill the recording here. Good night, good afternoon, good luck. Thank you. I'll see you in a couple weeks.